Hello, this is Scott at Aquascape ATX. I'm out here enjoying another beautiful December afternoon in Austin, Texas, and I thought I'd talk about different materials that you can use to build a aquaponics system. Before we jump into the different material types, I thought it would be prudent to talk about some criteria that you may want to mull over before you're making any decision. First thing to think about is aesthetics. So are you trying to build a system that is oasis in the backyard, or are you basically figuring out how can I grow the most plants, vegetables and fish at the minimal amount of cost? The second thing to think about is permanency of your build. So do you feel that you're going to be in your current location for 30 years? Or is there a good chance, in 3-5 years that you will be selling this house or selling your property that you built this, huge aquaponics system on, and now you've got to tear it out? Because most likely whoever buys your property will not share your love of aquaponics. It could happen. That could maybe sell your house, but most likely they're buying your house for other reasons, and now it becomes something that needs to be removed. So, keep that in mind. The other criteria that I would like to mention is location on your property. So you need to think about how much space you want to dedicate to an aquaponics, and you probably want to circle with your spouse on this one. How easy is it to get construction equipment in there, especially if you're doing major things like masonry? Can you get electricity to the location? You're going to want at least one 15 amp circuit, I would say two, and that's not going to provide. If you're planning on heating your water with electricity, you probably are going to need a lot more than that. I think it's good to have water routed to your aquaponics as well for refilling the tanks. Even though the aquaponics uses much less water than conventional garden, it still does need water. And then if you're using a fish like a tilapia, especially the Mozambique tilapia, they will not like the cold water we have here in Austin winters, so you're going to have some type of heat, which most likely you're going to want to use natural gas due to cost implications. The other thing to think about, locations on your property. If you have a sloped area, this is great for aquaponics because you can take advantage of the slope for waterfalls and water features. You can put your sump at the lower end of it. You can put ponds at the higher end. So actually, a sloped area it's a nice use for a sloped area. If it's too sloped to hang out on and it's annoying, well, you can convert that to aquaponics. The other factor to consider is budget. So you can spend a decent amount of money like any backyard project if you want to, or you can go pretty low budget. There are trade-offs with all the other factors of aesthetics and permanency of the build and durability of it. So it's not necessarily a linear scale, but there are trade-offs. So the other thing to be thinking about is how much money are you willing to dedicate to it. And it doesn't have to be upfront and you're locked into it. It's something like on my system, I let it evolve over time. So if I haven't scared you with talking about expenses and location, aesthetics, and all these deep decisions, then and I guess you're still with me here, so I haven't scared you off. Let's continue on into different type of materials to use when building out a aquaponic system. Okay, the first methodology, probably the most popular, you see it in all the how-to guides, are IBC totes. These are typically 300-gallon metal tote. Should be food grade, that you cut the top third off, flip it over, use that as your garden bed, and then the bottom 2/3 ends up being your pond. This is very attractive because they're very low cost, easy to get. All the plumbing is external and accessible, so it's easy to make modifications and expansion. And if you decide to tear it down, it's simply take it apart and move it with you to a new location, or give it away or trash it. But it's not a big deal to get rid of it. I'd say the two downsides to IBC tote is it's kind of ugly. You're looking at a pile of several big plastic totes, and you can dress them up, I guess, and make it look not too bad. Put it behind a fence. And the other thing is going to limit the size of the fish. Like my tank I'm sitting on here, pond I'm sitting on here is it's pushing about 1,000 gallons, and I have several 3 to 4 pound bass in it. If you're doing an IBC tote, you're going to be limited on the size. There's not going to be enough water volume there for them to grow into a big, really cool fish. The second technology to talk about is EPDM pond liners. These people use them all the time in goldfish pools, and they are a very attractive solution. Simply you dig a hole in the ground, and then you drop your liner on it, put some rocks around the outside to hold it up, and voila, you have a pond. And if you decide that you want to rip it out later, then you simply dispose of the liner and fill in the hole. So it has some attractive features that way. It's probably best used in, as I mentioned, in a hole. So you think of digging a hole for a sump in the lowest part of your system. If you're doing a tank that's raised above ground, and I would not mess around, like if you've built a wooden box or other type of vertical structure, I would not mess around with using EPDM liners. I just think it's not worth the hassle. I would rather go on mine. Anything I did that I needed to seal it, I used liquid rubber neoprene with the textile fabric on all the seams. The other thing, if you are using an EPDM liner, make sure it is pond grade. It's not a roofing. The roofing ones have toxic chemicals in that would be very detrimental for your fish and plants. The next material I think is very attractive for aquaponics is red western cedar, which I've built these boxes out of. I would not use pressure treated wood because you have a risk of those chemicals that they treat the wood with leaching into your ponds and getting into your food supply, so I don't think it's worth the risk. And the western red cedar is about the same price. These I built up using screws and glue, and it's a solid 2x6s on the bottom, and then then build layers of the box. Once that was done, then I coated it with the liquid rubber neoprene, and make sure, as I mentioned before, you use the textile fabric on all the seams and corners. And you're going to do a bunch of layers of it, but you can do like 1 or 2 a day, so you can knock it out pretty quick. Make sure you do all your seams, all your through-hole fittings ahead of time before you put on the liquid rubber neoprene. The other thing on wooden boxes you need to remember is they're very heavy, so they're going to require a lot of support. And I'll switch here. So you can see I have this particular one is built on top of a fish pond. It's kind of an intermediate sump. And I have steel. The big thing I like to do on the wooden boxes is they're building either stone or concrete supports, but all the lower structure underneath is tied together with rebar, so there's very little chance of anything shifting. You want to put a good solid foundation underneath it, just like you would for a deck, probably even more so. So I think decks typically they don't tie all the different beams together, but I like doing that just to make sure nothing's going to shift. This one here I actually did using weathering steel. I think it's a 1-inch angle, and welded up a frame the size of the box, and then added a trim piece on it after it was all done. And same thing here, all that weathering steel is set in concrete with rebar to make sure nothing's going to move around, because these wooden boxes are very, very heavy, and if it starts shifting, then you're going to be inviting leaks And also, that box falling over would be an extreme safety hazard, because if that fell on somebody, they're probably not going to survive that. The downside with boxes, I would say, is especially one this size, that's not getting moved. If I decide to sell the house, that's going to be chopped up into pieces and disposed of. If you had some smaller boxes, I could conceivably see them being used or moved. If you empty all the materials out, you could move them. But anything this big is probably more trouble than it's worth to move it. Another way to construct garden beds is actually using window boxes. Specifically, I would probably stick with plastic wooden window boxes. You can, just like the wooden box, you can textile tape all the corners and seams and then coat them with the liquid rubber neoprene. And again, just like the wooden box, make sure that you're doing your seams or all your through-hole fittings before you put the neoprene on there. The nice thing about the window boxes too is they are very lightweight, so if you decide you want to move the system, just empty out the median you put in there, and then you can move it to a new location on your aquaponics, or if you're relocating the entire system because you're moving, it's a pretty easy thing to move. The next category for building material I'm going to treat as a group, but it includes concrete, gunite, stone, and CMUs, or concrete masonry units, or when I was growing up they were called cinder blocks. These are all a great material to build ponds out of. That's why they're in-ground pools that last decades and decades are built out of masonry. So it's once it's properly built, if it's properly built, you can get 50, 100-year plus lifetime out of anything built out of masonry. When I'm building them, I typically build the wall on a foundation, footer, and then I'll add a wire mesh across the walls and floor, all the interior surfaces all tied together. Then I'll add several inches of masonry on top of that, and then add Aquafin IC, a couple coats of that to permanently seal the surface. I'd say the downside, there's a couple downsides to masonry. One, it's pretty expensive. That can be somewhat offset if you do the labor yourself, and if you look at, I would say stone or CMU blocks are probably the leaning more towards DIY versus gunite or concrete, but you can do it yourself. The other downside to it is the permanence of the structure. If you sell the property and the person who buys it says, I don't want that, and they require you to pull it out, it's going to be jackhammers and backhoes, or bobcats at least, to pull out all the rubble. So its permanence and durability can be a downside if you decide to pull it out, if it needs to be removed at some point in the future. So most people think of masonry, think the first thing that comes to mind is concrete. This is where you set up a form with rebar and then pour a bunch of liquid concrete out of a cement truck that you can mix by hand into the forms, wait for it to harden. A very tried and true technology, and you can build a pond out of it. There is some concern of a seam between the bottom pour and the side pour, which I previously talked about adding that layer of mortar across the inside would solve that issue. And I would recommend on your pond sizes or dimensions that you do something rectangular. This way, if you decide you want to sweep the pond to harvest fish, you can go along the long axis and sweep them into a tighter area that you can eventually net them. If you're trying to net fish out of a big pond like I have, these 500, 2,000 gallon ponds, it's pretty tough to, you're not going to be able to catch them. So I am relegated to catching my fish with a hook and line, with a worm or a pellet or something. So gunite is a neat technology where you form a wire frame of whatever dimension you feel like making, and then a crew comes in and sprays the concrete over the frame and then works it into a final finish. So this is something that's not very DIY friendly. You're most likely going to have a crew come in and do it, but it is the most versatile. You can make any shape you want, and this is the technology that they use typically for swimming pools, and that's why you see all the cool different dimensions on pools. The other advantage of doing the gunite is that step that I mentioned of adding the wire and the wire mesh across everything in the mortar. Really, that is mimicking what you get out of the chute with gunite. But the thing to remember on gunite is you're going to be paying a crew and a cement truck. So this is probably the most expensive way to build a masonry pond. The last category of masonry is stone or CMUs, cinder blocks, and these are very DIY friendly. You can dig a trench for your footer, add the rebar in it, and then start building up your wall at your own pace around the whatever perimeter you want. And then, as I mentioned before, doing that wire mesh and mortar continuous across the inside seals the whole thing and ties it all together. So this is something that you can, as you have time and you feel like it, you can build your wall and then finish it off with that coat. So it is very DIY friendly. There are some details on the cinder blocks that you should be doing, like adding the rebar, vertical rebar inside it, and backfilling with concrete. Stone on mine, I didn't really bother with that, and probably you could get away with it on a 2 or 3 foot wall of CMU blocks, and I'll show you some of what I've done. So here's some of my walls you can see from the top, and this one, I just kept building it up, and this is not even full regular blocks. These are more of you would put on the side of a house. So the wall by itself is pretty not very strong. You could knock it over pretty quickly, but once I added the wire mesh over the top, down the wall, and then tied it into the bottom, before I poured the mortar on the bottom, that ties it all together and makes it pretty structurally rigid. Little features like this little step there, that will actually add a lot of rigidity to a wall. But this is the technology that I liked, and I used it all over the place, probably way too much, but it does, I think it's a very clean look. I enjoy coming out here and the morning or evening, walking around, looking at the vegetables, looking at the fish. It's just a nice pleasant, to me, it's a nice pleasant, more so than looking at a couple totes. And you can make any size pond you want. So, as in this pond here, the biggest one I put in there is, you can see some fish swimming around if you go up top here. I've got some bass have gotten really big in here. Now, getting them out of here, catching them and eating them could be another story, but they're all hiding right now. But you can see it's a pretty big pond, and I integrated it inside this playscape. So it's you can kind of watch fish while you're playing on the playscape. Kind of cool. So thank you for watching this video on materials. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments and I will try and answer them. I will be doing some future videos where I deep dive into each one of these materials on a more step-by-step guide and more details. If you liked this video, please click the like and subscribe. It helps my metrics and helps the video be distributed to wider audiences. So have a good day and happy gardening.